the Cosmic Desktop has finally arrived. And if you've seen my first impression stream, you may know a lot of my thoughts already. But in this video, I'm going to try to make them a bit more structured and coherent. And I've actually looked into problems to see if they actually are problems or me being stupid. A lot of them actually are problems because keep in mind, Cosmic is in alpha. Alpha 1, in fact. So alpha software has alpha problems. There are parts of the desktop that do feel relatively polished, but you are going to run into problems, even just doing basic things. And I don't mean features missing, I mean things being blatantly broken. So everything I talk about today is only representative of Alpha 1 and the set of commits I'm currently using. If you're watching this in 6 months, a year, 3 years from now, Cosmic is going to be a completely different desktop. Now, before we get into the countless array of bugs and missing features, let's start with what Cosmic does actually have. Now, I'm gonna have to look back and forth every so often because Cosmic doesn't have a global hotkey system or a way to hack it like KDE does, so I have to be focused on the window to have my shortcuts function. But what Cosmic does have is its windowing and workspace system. Now, as there is very little documentation on any of the configuration files, if something does not exist in the settings GUI, I'm basically just going to assume it doesn't yet exist because to most people, it probably doesn't exist and I probably don't know about it anyway. One important thing about the config files is if there is a GUI representation of the config files, so something like your active window hint size, which is your border size, don't use the config file because if you modify the config file directly, it'll desync from the GUI, and then every time you make a change in the GUI, it will reset back to the value in the GUI instead of going from the value in the config file. There is an open bug report about it. It's a really weird bug. It'll be fixed eventually. Anyway, workspaces and windowing. Cosmic makes use of a dynamic workspace system. What this means is as you make more windows, as you use more workspaces, it is going to automatically make them for you. Now, right now, there should only be one. There we go. There is a bug right now where if you only have one workspace, you might actually have a second empty one just because it just doesn't get deleted. So when you have no open windows, it should only give you one workspace. If we go and make a window, now we have 2 workspaces. If I go to that workspace, make a window here, now we have 3. What it tries to do is always make sure you have one empty workspace. It is worth noting that by default, these are going to be monitor independent workspaces. This is the way that I like it. This is the way that most tilers work. If you're coming from something like KDE, you can go and set it to workspaces span displays instead, and then when you swap workspace, all of your monitors swap at once. Now, I'm fine with dynamic workspaces, but personally I prefer a static system where I can say, I want 5 workspaces on monitor 1, I want 3 on monitor 2, I want 2 on monitor 3. And then what I'll usually do with window rules is say, I want terminals to spawn on, let's say, workspace 1. I want Discord on workspace 2. I want Thunderbird on workspace 3. And I know it is always going to be there. Currently, there isn't a window rule system anyway, so you can't do that. But eventually, there will be window rules. Every desktop has window rules. I would like, at that point, to also have a static system as an option. Don't get rid of this. GNOME uses this system. GNOME users like it. But I would like the option to have something like i3 does. Now, the windowing system is the most polished part of what Cosmic currently has. Right now, we are using it in the floating mode, but we have this tiling applet down here where we can go and set the way I want it to be, or we can go and use the hotkey. I have it set to Super Y. This will put it into tiling mode, so spawn new windows. There we go, it's tiling. And then if we go press it again, now we go back to floating. Now, in the tiling system, this is a very, I guess you would say, dynamic splitting system. It works like BSPWM does, where instead of having a very set layout, instead what it's going to do is split based on the window you currently have focused. This means you can do really powerful things like have a simple grid layout, or you can do things like manage a master stack. Now, managing a layout is going to be a bit of additional work. I assume down the line there is going to be a documented API, so you could go and interact with how windows are being placed. Right now, though, documentation is very lacking. And of course, if you just want to take one window out the layout, there is a binding for that as well. Now, when it goes back into the layout, it's not going to go back to where it was previously. The way that it seems to work is split based on the last window in the layout you had focused. So you might see things jump around in an unexpected way. I think this is something that they could potentially address down the line, but isn't really a big deal. Most tilers are a bit weird when you take things out of the layout anyway. There is some weirdness about the tiling, but weirdness in a way where they're experimenting with different ways to interact with tiling. Window focus behaves like you would expect window focus to behave. Now, window focus does actually go between monitors as well. So if we're on the left-hand window here and we go left again, I'm now on my left monitor, which is nice to see. Also, if you're using your mouse, it is click to focus, not mouse follows focus or hover to focus. There is an open issue about this. Eventually, we are going to have hover to focus as well, which is very, very nice to see. But the thing that I want to talk about is the way that window swapping works. Now, if we go and swap vertically, that works as you would expect. But let's try to swap horizontally right. That is going to let you do a window rotation. That is not the way that would typically function. And let's try to do the same with the window on the left-hand side here. It's not going to swap. If we try it again, now it's actually going to change the layout. So the way that you actually swap these windows isn't using that binding. Instead, there is a dedicated swap binding default to Super X. And then we go and swap the window around without modifying the layout. I have never seen that before, but I don't hate that as an idea. It is absolutely something you have to get your hands on and play with yourself. A video is not going to do it justice. Now, there is also a separate rotation binding as well. That is called toggle orientation. And this also works on windows higher in the list as well. So rotating this one is going to rotate the entire layout. Now, there's another way that rotation can be used. So let's make a couple more windows and then use Super U. This now makes a big group of windows. And if we go and rotate this, it gets rotated as if it's just a single window. This also works for moving the windows as well, or doing things like swapping them. So we can go and swap that entire group over to here. And if you want to make the group smaller, you can do Super I instead of Super U. If you just want to break out of the group entirely, changing focus to another window is going to do exactly that. Now, another very interesting thing can be done with these groups. What you can do is make basically window tabbing. So any window whatsoever can have multiple windows in that same square. So if I go take this window right here and drag it on top of this one, it says stack windows. So now let's open BTOP on this one here and go focus on the left-hand window. And now we have two different applications in this same square. And this doesn't have to just be done with the same type of window. If I want to go and have my settings also in that, I can do the same thing as well. I don't think there is a limit in how many windows you can have tabbed together, so basically do what you want here. And the reason I bring up the groups is a really quick way to go and make a stack. If we go and expand this out and press Super S, all of those windows get added into a tab list. Now, I used my mouse to add a window to the stack. This can be done with keyboard binding as well. The way you do this is the move window binding. There is a lot of bindings in Cosmic that have sort of double meaning, and the meaning of them depends on the context being used in. In the same way, if we go and take, let's say, this window right here, I move it to the right, I move it to the right, now it is outside of the layout. That is also used for rearranging the tabs as well. One thing really nice about the bindings is a lot of what I've said for tiling isn't just about tiling. Most of them also apply to the floating mode as well. So if I use window focus, this works in the same way as it does in tiling. If I use window move, now it becomes window snapping. If I make a stack, it works the same way as before. Now, certain things don't work. Like, you can't use the window swap button. That actually would be really cool. I don't know why that's not present. In the same way, the mouse stuff in floating also applies to tiling as well, just in a slightly different way. So meta and then left click lets us move a window around, meta right click, resize the window. Let's go into tiling. So meta right click, resize the window. This is always nice to have. Meta left click lets us go and do a number of different operations. So we can go and take this window and swap them around like this. We can go and change the layout. We can go and, if there is a stack, we can go and put them in the stack. Keep in mind, the mouse stuff can be a little bit funky, and I would prefer a lot of this stuff to be on separate layers. So if we have a window like this, for example, if we want to go and put it over here, it's gonna like do a couple of things in between. If you want it down the bottom, it's kind of like you rotate the window around. This is the safest way to interact with things. I kind of wish it was, instead of holding down the meta key, maybe for certain interactions you hold down the alt key or hold down the control key, and it lets you go and be very explicit about what you're doing with the mouse. Now, I'm looking at my notes here, and there were a couple of bugs I was going to mention, like moving my mouse between monitors caused some graphical flickers, and those seem to be gone now. Some people have seen issues where the workspaces here are flickering. When I use a virtual machine, I do see that myself. I haven't seen it on hardware, though. I'll talk more about the workspace previews in just a moment, but one thing to note is I have a feeling that there's nobody on the Cosmic team that uses vertical displays, because I've seen a lot of vertical display bugs. The workspace previews on my vertical monitor are rotated as if it thinks it's a horizontal monitor. I've not seen this one before, but I'll report that one afterwards. Also, I imagine this is just an oversight, but if a window is locked up, if a window is frozen, there is no visual indication that that has happened. On things like KDE, the window is grayed out, and most other operating systems and most other desktops do something fairly similar. That'll be there eventually. Right now, it is very easy to cause a window to lock up. The easiest one is the settings, and it has gotten better. It was really, really bad at the start of the alpha. But if we go and change the active window hint size, this window is now locked up. It's going to be locked up for about 5 or 6 seconds because there is a lot of additional data being written that doesn't need to be written. And on a slower hard drive, you're going to notice that lockup. Now, originally, with sliders, you could not use them at all. An example of this being in the panel. If you tried to drag this slider, it would not move. Now it's just very, very laggy as you move it, which is better, but still not optimal. A lot of data being written is only part of the problem. The second problem, and you probably noticed as I was dragging the slider around, is there's no save button in the settings, so settings are live applied. So if there's any write issues where trying to change a setting causes too much data to be written, every time you touch the setting, it's causing that write to happen. In the long run, auto-applying settings is going to be amazing. Right now, though, it really holds back any ability for me to actually use the settings. I'll save talking in depth about ricing Cosmic and all the fun stuff you can do until there's more things you can do, but also until I can actually use it on my system without it completely saturating my drive. Now, this isn't just a mechanical hard drive thing. It also happens on NVMe SSDs as well. It is not as extreme, but you are still going to notice it. And while I'm here, I really despise unmarked sliders. What is small? What is large? I don't know. I know they are different things, and I know it is going to change something, but what is the height of this? If I drag this slider, what is this right here? How many % am I on? if there was a tooltip that told you the amount of pixels it was or something like that, that would be a big improvement. And on the topic of settings, the display settings. Now, you probably already noticed the first problem here. Why in the world is this space so absolutely massive for 3 monitors? This extra space here does not need to be here. Also, if you drag a monitor around, as soon as you let go of the mouse, it is instantly going to be applied. So it is entirely possible to put yourself into a layout that is completely unusable. There needs to be a reset layout button right here to recover the user into a state that they can actually use. Otherwise, there needs to be a save button, because you don't want to do something like drag this. Oh, they fixed it. Okay, so there was a bug where you could just drag the monitor way out here and have a broken layout. That's gone now, which is good. Now, whilst you do have your fractional scaling, which is very nice to see, variable refresh rate is missing here. So you cannot actually change that setting right now. You can do mirroring, which is nice. So if you want to do that, that is there. Take back what I said earlier about the graphical flickering being gone. It's not showing up in the capture, but I am seeing a green line randomly appear over my screen as I move between the displays. So it's definitely still there. It's just not as extreme. One thing I'm very happy about, because I use this quite often for breaking out of a game window, is there are bindings to automatically move your cursor between different displays. Now, it's go next and go previous. It is not cyclic, so when you get to the final display or the first display, you do need to use the other binding to go in the other direction. There's also a problem here, and that's the monitor layout. So you don't specify the order of this. So because you don't specify the order, the binding is based on the order the displays are plugged in and recognized by your GPU. So if you have some weird layout, the binding might go in a weird order. Now let's move on to shortcuts. This is under Input Devices, Keyboard, and then View and Customize Keyboard Shortcuts. If you go and modify a keyboard shortcut, it is going to tell you that that shortcut has been modified, which does make it very easy to see what is custom. It doesn't tell you what the original binding is in here, so it doesn't help you that much. But it's a step, right? If they show the default there as like, this is the default, this is not something bound, but it's something you can re-enable, that would be nice. There is a reset to default binding here, so you can go and do that. You just don't see the default. And on the topic of bindings, they are very basic right now. So how do you normally set a binding? Normally, you would press the keys that you want to use. As you might be able to tell by this little icon right here, you don't do that. Instead, it's actually an input field. They know about the problem. They just needed something that worked, that was ready for the alpha. Obviously, down the line, it's going to detect your keys. Now, the way you save a binding is also really odd. So what you might think is, let's set this to Super plus Alt plus Shift plus J. You probably think add key binding is what's going to add it. No. That will actually delete what you just wrote and go back to what is already bound. Add key binding gives you a secondary text field. Instead, what you do is you change the binding. Let's again, Super Alt plus Shift plus J, and then press Enter. Then the binding is changed. Nowhere does it mention that that's the way you're supposed to do it, so it's very easy to not realize. I imagine later down the line, there's going to be a button or something there that tells you what you need to do. Preferably a button that says Save. That will be nice. As you may have been able to tell from some of the other things I've shown, the settings is very, very bare right now. This is one of the things that still needs a lot of work, and you can probably tell by the fact that a lot of things are just missing in here. Thankfully, there is the ability to disable mouse acceleration, but a lot of other things you would want to be here just don't exist yet. Also, there are a number of stubs, like firmware details. There's nothing here. Users, there's nothing here. I think About does have something, but a lot of places around here have stubs. And even if you search for stuff, what's a good example? Workspace. Yeah, you're going to start seeing stubs appearing here where it's supposed to be showing you the binding that is set to that, but that feature has not been finished yet. So there's currently basically a link into the keyboard shortcuts and then a stub sitting under it. Now, I want to briefly talk about the panel and dock system. While these are technically different things in the settings, underlying it, they are the exact same thing. Much like KDE, there is a lot of customization here. You can drag applets around. In my case, I don't even have a dedicated dock. I've got the applications in my panel. This is just the way that I want to do it. Now, most of the power is going to come from the configuration files because in the GUI, at least at this stage, it's only got the dedicated panel and the dedicated dock. Maybe down the line, there'll be like a GUI panel editor like you have in KDE. That's just not there now. So at this stage, it's pretty simple. It lets you replicate behavior you see on things like Ubuntu and things like that, but not much else. And because the documentation just isn't there for the config files, it's hard to dig into it and add all of that fun stuff that's probably there if you can work out how the configs work. Also, I don't like the way that panel hiding works currently. So right now it is set to always visible. This means unless you're in full screen, which Cosmic doesn't have a dedicated full screen button, this is just maximize, it is always going to be visible. Basically, unless you're playing a game, watching a YouTube video, you're gonna see the panel. What I like to see, and I don't like automatically hide. So automatically hide, it's always going to be hidden unless you mouse over it. What I want to see is it is visible in this state right here. If I maximize, it is not visible. And if I drag a window behind it, it still stays visible. This is the way that most bars work on X11. I'm used to it. KDE doesn't have this feature. I would really like to see it, and I hope Cosmic brings it back. Okay, earlier I mentioned the window overview. Now, by default, there would be like a button in your panel that says overview. There's one for the app launcher as well. I know GNOME does that. I don't like it, so it's not in my panel. I just use the binding. Super W for the overview. Now, there's a couple of fun things you can do here. If we use the focus bindings for left and right, this will let you move your mouse between the monitors. I don't know if it's intended because it does cause some weird focus behavior. So I'm going to assume that's a bug. One that's not a bug is if we press Super 1, this is going to go to Workspace 1, Super 2, Workspace 2, Super 3, Workspace 3. That's a nice way to do it. Now, I would like the option to directly use the numbers or use the arrow keys or the Vim keys to cycle between the workspaces, but at least having the option to do it with the numbers is something. Now, the app tray, app launcher, whatever you want to call it, is on Super A. First time you open it, it does tend to be slow to open. Every other time after that, it is fast. This works as you would expect from GNOME or basically anything. We can search for an application. All right, it's GNU image, blah, 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 blah. And it shows the application. If we click on it, it will open the application. Nothing too crazy. There is a folder system here. So if you want to have applications like terminals, for example, we can then go find Alacrity, drag it into that folder. And if we then click on that folder, Alacrity is going to be there. If we delete the folder, now the application is going to go back to the main home here. Honestly, I never use this thing. I know some people like them, but hey, if I'm going to use any sort of launcher built in Cosmic, the one I use is pressing Super. This is basically your equivalent of Crunner on KDE and does the things you would expect. So we can search for something like Alacrity, so that also has numbers next to it. So if I press Control 6, it'll go and run the thing on Control 6. We can basically open whatever we want to open here, or we can go and focus on a window with this as well. Now, if I'm being honest, I know why this is here. Like, I get it. Also, there's some additional things here, like you do web searches and terminal commands and things like that. this is cool for the people who live in Cosmic and have always lived in Cosmic or are coming from GNOME and use GNOME systems or KDE systems, things like that. I have systems that live outside the desktop. Usually I use a D menu style launcher. So for me, I'm probably not going to end up using this that often. But for the most part, it works exactly as you would expect it to. One thing to note about the launcher on the super key is you currently can't disable the super key in the GUI. You can only change this to be different things like workspaces or open applications. I hope down the line they do support a modifier-only shortcut system and a way in the GUI to fully disable this. There is a way in the config file to turn off super key doing something, but again, it's not documented and it's just listed in a random GitHub issue. Now, when we talk about the launcher, there is another thing very similar. Alt-Tab, and it's similar for a reason, because it's the same interface minus the search field. The fun thing about it, though, is it's also broken. So you might notice the control bindings there to go and switch to things. They don't work, because how do you press Control 2, for example, when you have the Alt key pressed? If we let go of the Alt key, it closes this. So the binding isn't actually Control 2, it's actually Alt Control 2. Oh, one more thing to note about the dock down here, or the app tray. In a lot of desktops, pressing something like Super 1, Super 2, Super 3 is going to open things down here. Those bindings are for swapping workspaces, and currently there are no bindings for opening these applications down here. I would be very, very surprised if there weren't bindings sometime down the line. Now, here's a bunch of just random fun little problems. If you have a full screen video and use the maximize binding, it causes this weird gray letterboxing. I showed this on my stream. If you try to screenshot a vertical monitor, don't. It doesn't work right now. As I said, there's a lot of things that don't work with vertical monitors. Firstly, it'll only screenshot half the monitor. Secondly, the freeze frame it does of that monitor is rotated, so you can't actually capture things properly anyway. Now, here's my file manager. I'm not using the Cosmic one right now because I just don't have it installed. My context menus don't work. I don't know why. I've never seen a desktop do that before. Also, I'm not sure why this happens, but I'm not pressing the button on my mouse, but it's staying as if I'm clicking, and I've had this happen on a bunch of windows, is not just an Alacrity thing. Now, whilst I said there is no binding in Cosmic for going full screen, I kind of lied, because one of the defaults built into Cosmic is F11 to go full screen, with the exception of the terminal, which interprets it as a string of characters instead. Also, this one is a very big problem for me. In OBS, you currently cannot do individual window capture. The option is not present. You can do whole screen capture, and that's it. Now, at some point down the line, that is going to be fixed. There is an open draft right now to specifically fix this issue. I thought it had already been landed. I had been told it was already landed, so that's slightly disappointing to me. It means, for many other reasons, I cannot daily drive Cosmic. Now, as I said, Cosmic is an alpha, and honestly, I could probably spend the next 3 hours just talking about random little bugs I found, weird replication conditions for them, some of them which just don't make any sense whatsoever. Cosmic is an alpha, and maybe I'll do some streams where I'm doing some Cosmic testing. I don't know, it sounds kind of fun. But as it stands, the core fundamentals of Cosmic are there, ready to test. Now that the ricing bug, the settings bug, is not as bad, you can go and test things out if you have an SSD. If you have a mechanical hard drive, it might still be a little bit wonky, and I would wait for a couple more updates to go and do that. For me, right now, there's a couple of things Cosmic is missing that really bothers me. Mouse click to focus, I just don't want to deal with. It causes so many mistakes, and individual window capture. Everything else, Cosmic already has. The random little bugs, I guess the context menu in my file manager as well, but I could just use Cosmic files. Everything else is not perfect, but good enough not to drive me insane. And you know what? For an alpha, that sounds like a pretty good sell to me. Later down the line, there is going to be an alpha 2 and a beta and then a full release. I don't know what sort of time frame they are targeting, so we'll have to wait and see there. I will be covering Cosmic as we go forward. I might not make a lot of videos on it here and there. I do want to do a racing video when I actually can, but if there are any major updates come in, much like with GNOME and KDE, I will probably be talking about it. Whether I start daily driving it down the line, I'm expecting that'll probably be Alpha 2 at the rate things are going. So I guess look forward to that. If you've not played with Cosmic yet, go ahead and do so. And be sure if you run across, when you run across bugs, go and make bug reports about them. I am one of the few people making bug reports. There have been times where 5 bug reports in a row have been from me. So I would appreciate not having to make all the bug reports myself. So if anyone wants to help out, please go and do that. Anyway, if you have tried Cosmic, whether it be on Fedora, Arch, NixOS, or anything else out there, let me know what your experience has been like. Has it been good? Have you run across bugs? Or am I just cursed that everything that I want to do just falls into one of the bugs? I would like to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to LiberaPay, linked in the description down below. Right, global shortcuts. I need that as well, please. Thank you. That would be very nice. Anyway, that's going to be it for me, and give it a shot.
Like this.